Back now with Endgame and trying to break the political paralysis. Carlos Curbelo, you wanted to introduce a carbon tax. You were trying to at least start the debate about a carbon tax. But as we're watching what's unfolding in France and the protests and the pushback there, is a carbon tax doable? Is this the way to do it? Is a vice tax the way to go?
It's the most efficient, the most logical, and probably the most politically viable solution. I think Mayor Bloomberg and Governor Brown tried to make this point that the key is that the people who are being taxed, in this case it would be all the American people, trust that the revenues are going to be put to good use. And that's why in the bill I filed, we put almost all of it to infrastructure, because we know that's popular in this country and that most Americans believe that we have to invest in our infrastructure. We also set aside some funds to mitigate higher utility rates for lower income Americans. That is the key. And we know this is true because in Miami, recently they just passed a $200 million bond referendum, property tax increase to fund coastal infrastructure because the citizens understood that the funds were going to be put to good use. In other words, to protect them.
Our most trusted institutions are the military these days. And it does seem as if, since in the military, there's been more experience with seeing it in real time.
Well, the military tends to be very clear-eyed and pragmatic about threats, and it's a planning culture. So they like to look way off into the future. And what's interesting is while the Trump administration's been trying to take reference to the word climate change out of the national security strategy, out of the defense strategy, out of DoD reports, and to cut funding where it can, meanwhile, the Congress in the last two National Defense Authorization Acts has played a really, really important role, sort of putting in reporting requirements. Every service has to identify the 10 most vulnerable bases and mitigation efforts. You have to come up with an Arctic strategy for when the ice melts. You have to, as a combatant commander, factor climate change into your operational planning. This gives the department top cover. I actually think there's a role for the military as that respected institution to sort of be truth speakers on this and to say this is real, we're planning it for it, we're going to have to spend money on it to be able to continue to protect the country. So, you know, let's get over it and get on with it.
This is an interesting dynamic in the Congress as the president has acted irresponsibly on climate and made some, reckless comments. More and more Republicans in the House have moved to embrace this issue, to accept the science. When I got to Congress in 2015, there were maybe 2 or 3 Republicans even willing to utter the words climate change. Today we have over 40 on the record acknowledging that this is a real issue that requires government action, and they went on the record by joining the Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus.
I guess, is there any individual actions anymore, or is this just so large that individual, is this one of these, I remember going back to Jimmy Carter, hey, it was this collective action, if everybody can do their little. It feels like with climate change it doesn't. It feels like it's all stuck.
We really do need national policy that will become international policy.